Good evening. We'll be getting started in 3 minutes. Good evening, everyone, and welcome to the Masonic Seminar series. My name is Brother Katie Kumsie, and I am coming from our headquarters here in Colorado, United States. And I wanted to welcome everyone that is in the United States, North America, and across the country, or excuse me, across the world. I want to welcome you, whether it's in the morning or in the evening. Thank you for being with us tonight as we do a question and answer forum, which is one that I tend to hold once a year, is what I like to do, just to answer questions in general or very specific ones, depending on what they are. The Masonic Seminar series was started to provide information for those who felt a deep desire or a longing to be a Mason, but just really didn't know much about it, and it's hard to commit to something that you know very little about and that chooses not to disclose a lot about itself. So we started this in about 2018, and it has grown and has been very successful, so we continue it here at Universal Co-Masonry. Universal Co-Masonry has two groups. Masonic Seminar Series is one, and the other is the Masonic Philosophical Society. We are very different from each other. Here at the Seminar Series, we talk strictly about Masonry, and it's myself as your presenter, and occasionally I will have a guest speaker, but more often than not, you get to hear me talk for an hour and a half. With the Masonic Philosophical Society, we have in-person centers and we have online for North America as well. And that is a discussion group that talks about philosophy in regards to Freemasonry. So it's definitely still about Masonry, but it's more open, and it is a discussion group where you hear people of all different backgrounds and beliefs and opinions speak about whatever the given topic is. And then there is no restraint on the topic. It's not just philosophy by itself. It's also science and art and literature and politics, economics, that type of stuff, and how it all relates. But here at the seminar series, you get an hour and a half of pure concentrated masonry. And it is my hope, along with Brother Patrick Alessandra and Benjamin Hartle, who are here in the studio with me, it is our hope that when you walk away from this presentation each month, that you will come away a little more enlightened on what Freemasonry is in general and any of the specifics that are to Universal Co-Masonry. The comments and presentations that are given by the Masonic Seminar series and they're episodic. They're just done each month as a standalone. So for those who may miss months or are coming in or have been around for a long time, they all stand alone, and I do not build off of what was previously done. So if this is your first time, welcome, and don't worry, you're not going to be lost in the information because it stands by itself. Additionally, I have been a Freemason for over 20 years, and so what you're hearing is my opinions and my experiences. I'm sure if you had another Freemason in front of you, it might sound a little bit different as it will be coming through their experience. With that being said, tonight is a question and answer forum. I appreciate all of those who sent me your questions. If you are joining us on one of the platforms, including Zoom, we have people on X, YouTube, and Facebook. You are welcome to send in your questions to our moderators that are on there, tech support, which again is Brother Patrick Alessandra, who is doing X, Facebook, and YouTube. And then you have Brother Benjamin Hartle, who's running Zoom. So if you have a question that you were not able to get in, or one that comes to you in the middle of my answers, by all means, provide that to one of them and we'll get that question asked. Please keep in mind, we do have a limited amount of time. So if your question is not asked, it is not a personal thing. We just are either trying to keep things together or we are trying to make sure that the topic stays on topic. I'm going to be looking at my screen here periodically as I have the questions and my computer's off screen a little bit. So just give me 1 second while I minimize my view. There it is. And pull up some questions. There we go. All right. Of course, I made it like 3-inch font. So the questions are going to seem a little bit scattered just because they're coming from people of all different walks of life, some places of understanding in Freemasonry. But there's a couple places I want to point you to, and I'd ask Brother Patrick and Brother Benjamin to throw it in whatever place they need to so that people can access it. We do have a frequently asked questions page on our website, and we also have Masonic resources. We have a free publication library where you can go online and you can look at the books that we have available that you can read online for free. I highly recommend it. There's all different types of books on that. You won't necessarily see something that's specifically about Masonry, but you'll see a lot of other books that are related to, hopefully by the end of this presentation, it will make more sense why. We also have a podcast, Legends of the Craft, that is done by Brother Matthias and Brother Axel. I highly recommend that. And we also have, what else do we have? We have lots of stuff. We have short videos that have been done. We had one that was done on the Mystery of the Magi, Inanna, and was there one more? Or am I making that up in my head?
The Emerald Tablet.
The Emerald Tablet. Yeah. So we have a lot of media that's out there because we feel like the more information people have, the better. So if you want to read blogs or if you want to read books or if you want to go to videos or you want to listen to podcasts, we have that available for you. And I recommend that you steep yourself in that as you walk this journey in Masonry. All right. I'm getting old, so I have to put on my glasses here so I can read. All right, so a lot of the questions we get here in the general office as we deal with inquirers that are around the world is they want to know how to join from their specific country. I'm going to preface this with some information before I get to the answer. So it's going to take me a little bit of time to get there, but I think it's important information. So Universal Co-Masonry is international. In the United States and North America, it tends to be Masonry tends to be all for men, and are either done by province or by state. So the Grand Lodge of California or Grand Lodge of New York, and those are very specific to states. Universal Co-Masonry is all over the world, and there are a few orders like us. There's a International Order of the International Eastern Order. I was calling the Eastern Order. I should really know their.
The
Oh, see, I'm not the only one.
Freemasonry for men and women.
Yeah, we call it the Eastern Order because that's part of their name. But there's also the Ladrahiman, there's the Eastern Order, there's a few. I wouldn't say there's a lot, but there are many organizations out there that are international. And what that means is Universal Co-Masonry has one governing body, and that is the Supreme Council. And we have the head of that body is called the Most Sovereign Grand Commander. Now, Ladrahiman and other obediences that are international will call, they have a Grand Commander, Most Sovereign Grand Commander, which is the head of all of the federations, which is what they call the regions. So, you can have a region in France, well, not France, but like in India or whatnot. And then over each of those federations, you have a most puissant Grand Commander. So that's someone that's just right underneath the Grand Commander. In Universal Co-Masonry, we just have the Supreme Council and the head of our order, the most sovereign Grand Commander. And that Supreme Council governs all of the lodges that are under the banner of Universal Co-Masonry. They govern them all the same. So all the edicts that come out from the Supreme Council, it's not just going to be for one region, like just in the United States or just Canada or just the Philippines. It's for everyone. And we operate under the same ritual and the same rules. So we have the same grand constitution and general rules and regulations that we all follow. And it creates a very cohesive group. So members who travel to different lodges in different countries, the ritual might be in a different language, but it's very familiar because you recognize it's not like a variation of it's just the ritual in Portuguese. Usually it's Old Portuguese or Old English or Old Spanish and so forth. But you are able to sit with the members in that region having the same rules and the same understanding. We wear the same uniforms no matter what country we're in. So that being said, because we're international, we are not in every single country. So we don't disclose where we are at. We keep our membership secret. Even our membership doesn't even know how many members we have, and we keep personal information quiet. We don't publicly display people's membership or the personal information. All of that's kept for the privacy of our members. And so we're not in every country. So we often get a lot of inquirers in a day who really want to join us because they're into esoteric masonry, which is what we do here at Universal Co-Masonry, but they don't have a lodge in their country. So it's not impossible. It's a little harder to do it if you're coming from a place like we get a lot of inquirers in Kenya and around that area, as well as in the Middle East and in Europe. And if we don't have a lodge in your country, you have one or two options. Typically, if you go through the application process and you're accepted, then you could travel to one of the closest lodge to you, wherever that may be, and be initiated. And then brothers here at headquarters would oversee your study via the internet, doing virtual study groups. It doesn't take the place of lodges because being in a lodge is amazing, but it does help because it connects people who otherwise wouldn't have the opportunity. And in the hopes that if more and more people join in that area, we can form a lodge in that area. And in fact, we do have some lodges that are in formation right now in a couple countries because there are people there who have, as I said, it's not terraforming, but it's masoniforming the ground and making sure that everything's ready so that we can come in and open a lodge. That's one option. The other option is if you get enough members or enough people who apply and are accepted, which is at minimum 7 people, then we come to you and we open a lodge there. It takes many years, but we are invested in people's education and spiritual advancement. So we don't just come in, make you a Master Mason and leave. We work with you throughout the entire process, but we would come to you and initiate you and then give you a second and a third degree in subsequent visits. So it is possible. It's a little harder. We have some people that have done the first where they have gone to different countries and been initiated and then came back and started a lodge in their area. And then we have some people, right now we have a lodge information that has 8 people that are going to be initiated. So we're working with them to bring a lodge into their country. So it isn't impossible, but it does require some work and dedication on both sides of it. But that's one of the major questions that we get about joining Universal Co-Masonry abroad. The next question I am asked is if a person was involved in a different esoteric path of inquiry and practice, would that be a reason to not pursue Universal Co-Masonry? The answer to this question is simple. It just depends. It depends on what esoteric path you are in. Um, there's a lot, I mean, a lot of members that have come to us have been or are Rosicrucian or are Martinist. Those are very compatible, and you can do both as long as you have the time. You can do both. There's some that are not compatible that would not allow you to be a member of Universal Co-Masonry. Off the top of my head, the one I can think of is the Golden Dawn. And that is just, we are philosophically very different, and it's hard to serve two masters. So it's preferential that you choose one over the other. So really, if you're wondering if that's your path, like, because when we get seekers in Masonry, they love to seek. They look at everything, which is what they should. And there are a lot of things that will attract them. And so there's also the question of like, can I be a member of both? And again, what we do is if you're going to join, we ask you to disclose it so we can make sure that there's a compatibility there and also that you have time. Because if you don't have time for both, then really you should only do one, and whatever one that is that you choose. So if you have a path that you're following that is in the same vein as Masonry or Universal Co-Masonry, I would just check to see if you have enough time to do both before you step into being a co-mason. For those that I know that are members of various, like a Rosicrucian and a Mason or a Martinist and a Mason, they find it very compatible with the two philosophies. The only time I've seen someone not do well is when they're working on an esoteric tradition that's more left-handed path than a right-handed path, and they have never, without exception, stayed because it's just not compatible. You have to choose one or the other. Before I get into the next question, I don't want this to feel too disjointed, and then I'm going to ask Brother Patrick and Brother Benjamin if there's any questions on what I've talked about from their various platforms. Um, there are different styles of Masonry, and it's all in their interpretation of what the philosophy of Masonry is trying to do. And you'll hear the male crafts, which is the all male order that most people are familiar with, say that Masonry is about making good men better. And they are very gender specific in that and saying that's just men. Um, and I don't think, obviously, they're wrong. I think Masonry does make people better people if they choose to. But I think it's much deeper than that. If you really take to heart the rituals and the grand mystery of Masonry, it is transformative, whether you want it to be or not. Extremely esoteric as it is deeply personal, and it is highly enriching to not only yourself, but everyone around you. As I've watched people over the years who have really embraced the philosophy of Masonry and tried to live what Masonry teaches, which is to live a virtuous life, a life worthy of remembrance, that as I've watched them, they have transformed into wonderful people. And so it just depends on what type of masonry you're looking for, whether or not you want an esoteric. There's some lodges, not in our order, but in their obediences that tend to be religious in the sense of like you have to be Christian or Jewish. In Universal Co-Masonry, you don't have to be that. You can be if you want. I mean, if that's what you choose. But we have other spiritual traditions and religions that are a part of it, and we're adogmatic, meaning that we're not without dogma, as you might think, that we're not without a certain dogma, meaning, oh, you have to be this specific religion in order to be Mason. We're not that. We have our dogmas, we have landmarks that say, okay, if you believe in this framework, then you will do lovely in Masonry. If you believe outside of that framework, then Masonry is probably not for you. And an example of that is believing in something higher than yourself. So the neo-atheist, the one that's, borderline, if not fully embracing of nihilism, would not be a good fit for Masonry at Universal Co-Masonry because they don't believe in the transcendent. And part of our purpose in Masonry is to the glory of the great architect. And if that's not something that resonates with you, then half of the aim of Masonry isn't going to work. The other half being to the perfecting of humanity. So keep that in mind that there are landmarks in masonry. Not all masonry comes the same size or shape. It's very much like pick any religion and then you have different types of that religion expressed. I pick Christianity because that's the biggest one here in the United States. And you have the Baptists, you have the Protestants as a whole, you have the Catholics, you have the Mormons, and so forth and so on. They're all Christian, but they express it differently, and Masonry is no different. So you have to look at what it is you're looking for to understand where you should go in Masonry, if be a Mason at all. I'm going to stop here before I go forward. Brother Patrick or Brother Benjamin, are there any questions related to that before I move on? We're good. Brother, okay. All right. So I'm actually going to jump down a little bit just because we're talking about religion, and I had a few questions about religion, and I'm going to kind of dovetail it into myth and legend. One of the questions I received is, do we honor the King James Version of the Bible as the one true, volume, sacred text? And it is included as not necessarily King James Bible, but the Gospels and the Torah are included as a part of the sacred text, but we are not confined to that one book for the entire understanding of Masonic philosophy. So some people are very literal with the Bible and they're very specific. That's the only book. We would not be the Masonry for you if that's the case. I would recommend reaching out. If you're a gentleman, you want to reach out to the all-male order because they tend to be more Christian in their pursuits. They prefer more Christian members than the spiritual type that we often get here at Universal Co-Masonry. So we don't hold just to one book. We study all the major books of all the major religions, the Dhammapada, the Vedas, the Analects, the Torah, the Bible. Like we study them all. And so you have to be very open to that if that's something if you wanted to be a Mason with Universal Co-Masonry, you need that. Now, here's the interesting thing about Masonry and religion. And again, this is probably something I can present on. I know I could present on at another time and take a whole hour and a half on like Freemasonry and religion. But I'll touch a little bit here in this presentation. When we look at religion and Freemasonry, the Bible's important. The Old Testament and the New Testament is important, especially the Old Testament, because that's the story of Freemasonry. It's no secret that with Freemasonry is King Solomon's Temple. It's only found in one of the great books of the world, specifically to the story of Freemasonry. So you will see that that is the book that is prevalent in every lodge in the sense that it's there. Now we have all the other books in the lodge, but our story, it's like the history of, I like to call it fictional history of Masonry is embedded in that book. So you will see that book a lot. But if you're someone who's like, well, I'm not Christian or I'm not a Jew, that's fine. There's nothing wrong with that. Why that book is there is to understand our history and the story that goes along with it. That is our tradition and our background. Now, religion and Freemasonry, I would venture to say that Freemasonry doesn't think ill of religion. Now, maybe some of the members do, and that's within their own prerogative, but the philosophy of Freemasonry doesn't hold issue with theology and the study of, returning back to God and, being one with the great architect or whatever expression that might take. What Freemasonry has taken issue with over the years of its history is the despotism that has come and the tyranny that has come with not just religion and other forms. You have civil dictators and whatnot that are horrible and Masonry stood against. But specifically, it's people, not the ideas that Masonry can take issue with. And I don't want to say it's necessarily this person specifically, but they will say, well, no, every man should have the right to choose what religion he or she believes in, and no one has the right to oppress a person into thinking a thought. And that's where Freemasonry will put the fight up, or they'll, whenever there's a country that falls to a fascist dictatorship, it's always the Masons that end up going first, or at least one of the top three listed people, because we're free thinkers. We're about allowing not only ourselves the religion's freedom to think as we want to, but also other people. Like what I say often is, I may not like what you say, and I may spend the rest of my life fighting what you say, but I will die for the right for you to to say what you want. Like, and that's really kind of a Masonic stance is like we will fight for the idea for man to be free and to be their own sovereign. And so, if you want to be whatever religion you want, that's a beautiful thing. And so religion and masonry do go hand in hand, but there isn't the assumed oppression that a lot of people come to masonry for. They don't want, a guru or a certain type of religious leader. And in Universal Co-Masonry, especially the head of our order, she has worked very hard to instill the fact that, when she speaks about whatever it is, if it's about ritual or the interpretation of the Grand Constitution or stuff like that, her word carries. But if we're sitting around at an MPS, a Masonic Philosophical Society meeting, and we're talking about reincarnation, she won't speak as the most sovereign. She will speak as herself, and she will make sure there's that distinction. And that's how we all are. Like the brothers here in this office, we have certain positions we hold in lodge, and when we are acting in that position, it's very formal, and we don't give our opinions unless requested by the master of the lodge. But when I do give an opinion on a philosophic or theosophical or religious idea, it comes from Brother Katie specifically, not the senior warden or whatever office I'm holding. And so religion has its place in Masonry, but it's definitely safeguarded so that people can worship freely. You'll never hear in a religious debate, or you shouldn't hear in a religious debate, that you're wrong. I was raised a certain tradition, and no one's ever told me, well, you're wrong. Now, I did have a brother tell me that that religion was full of crazy people, and that is not very nice. But we had a great discussion about that, and it opened up a great dialogue about religion in general. And so there's opportunities for people to really work through the idea of religion. One of the things that we run into problems with in Masonry is because everything's symbol, right? Um, there is symbols that each one of us are impacted negatively with just in life. And I'll give you an example. So I grew up in a religious tradition that didn't allow crosses. So I never owned crosses. They were never on our wall in the house. And um, so I remember after I had left my parents' religion at the age of 18, I was at a family member's house on my husband's side, and they have a wall of crosses, and it was very, like, I had a very visceral reaction to it, more so than I think I should have, but I had been a Mason for maybe a year or two, and I just really did not like that. And it was really good because Masonry taught me how to take back symbols from interpretations of others. And that's the problem we have is a lot of people come in and say, well, I don't like the name God. I don't like that word. Or I don't like crosses, like in the case of my situation. Or I don't like this or I don't like that. Well, take it back. Take it back and figure out what it means. And, I spent a lifetime journey trying to understand what the different crosses meant and, trying to understand my complicated reaction to it, only to uncover the fact that I absolutely love the various crosses and what they mean. And it holds a deep significance to me. And that's because I took back that symbol. So in Masonry, you will find as you proceed, there are things that will hit you that you're like, I didn't even know that that was within me. And the whole goal is to take back that which was taken away from you or that you allowed to be taken away from you and to understand it. And so that's why you see that in Universal Co-Masonry. We don't shy away from religion. In fact, we embrace the conversation of it. You may think religion as an organization is horrible. You may think it's great, but ultimately it comes down to discussing the pros and cons of such things. And in Masonry, there is no topic that is off topic in the sense of personal study. We want everyone to study as much as they can in whatever vein they want. One of the questions that came up in is related to this is why do we study lore and myth? And I would point you to the late Joseph Campbell, who is the author of the very famous book, The Hero of a Thousand Faces. I recommend to read it. It's a nonfiction, and the one thing I liked about it in the book was that, particularly with Masonry, because it is a Western esoteric tradition, so it's very Western philosophy. His book did not just stay with Western myths. It went into Asian and it went into African. It went all over the globe, and I really liked that. It was very, very global in its perception. And when you look at it, man learns through story. That's why when we're kids, we're told lots of stories, the fairy tales, and there's the great movies. I was growing up, it was Star Wars, and then there came Harry Potter, and then what's the next best one? Star Wars, Lord of the Rings. Oh, forgive me, Brother Benjamin, for forgetting Lord of the Rings. These great stories come up because they have what Joseph Campbell called truth claims. And it didn't matter what that story, like the outer dressing contained, inside was embedded an inherent and intrinsic truth that claimed a certain birthright, if you will. And it couldn't be changed. It was exactly what it was supposed to. And it was every person who interacted with that story, ultimately, the story was trying to get you to connect to the truth claim. So in Masonry, we have legend and we have myth, and we have a grand Masonic narrative, which is an epic story from start to finish. And it is Masonry's way of trying to get us to understand what that truth claim that it's holding, that wisdom that is contained inside of it. And Masonry is not going to tell you what to do in the sense of like, kind of like the Ten Commandments, like thou shalt not. What Masonry does, it tells you what you should do. You should live a virtuous life. You should be forgiving. You should greet everybody, whether they're a member of your organization or if they're just a lay person on the street. You should greet them like the golden rule. Greet them as you would like to be greeted. It tells you what to do in the sense of a positive affirmation. Live a virtuous life. Well, in order to live a virtuous and moral life, you got to go understand what that even means. So you have to go sit down with yourself and your understanding and not just sit there and be like, what do I think virtue is? Just assume you don't know and go look it up and study it and see the different camps and the different philosophies. And then ultimately you come into an understanding of like, okay, I get it. I get that virtue and I get that virtue. And then you have to have an understanding of how those virtues have a relationship with each other. How does justice and mercy have a relationship, if at all? Do all of the virtues have an interconnectedness to each other, or are there some that are solitary? I know there's always a big push for people to find the greatest, the first principle of all virtues. And I mean, I have my opinion, and I'm sure there are many people who have a different answer. But in order to actually have an opinion, remember, an opinion isn't a belief. It's not like, oh, I believe we had a beautiful day here in Colorado. It was nicer than it should have been. Super nice. And it's like, oh, I believe that today was the best day. That's just how I feel in a belief. It's very subjective. An opinion is someone who has worked really hard to understand all the different perspectives, in this case of a virtue or a vice, and then has come to an understanding of what those perspectives is trying to teach us and understands this all sides of it. That's why a Mason should be able to sit in any group and, depending on whatever they're talking about, give any perspective or understand the perspective, whether I agree with that person or not, understand the perspective that's coming at us. So myth and legend teach us many incommunicable lessons that, mouth to ear can't teach you. And it teaches us through dramas like a dream that's waking, where people are walking through and learning how to live in their dream a certain way. Masonry is the same way. You're going through a series of steps that teaches you over and over how to be, so that when you go into the waking world or the outside world, you've practiced it a dozen times and you know exactly what you're doing. Myth is extremely important. And one of the things that has been destroyed, utterly obliterated in modernity is myth. Don't get me started on Disney. I think Disney has destroyed many, many great myths because it has, I understand artistic interpretation, but it has destroyed the very essence, that truth claim of particular myths that were so important to convey such valuable lessons. And in Universal Co-Masonry, one of the jobs of the most sovereign Grand Commander is to make sure that the myth stays intact and that it is not co-opted by some philosophy or religion or political group. So we work very hard to make sure we have diverse ideas, and it's not just one group conglomerating together that will ultimately take over the myth claim and wipe it clean. So why study ancient lore and myth? Because you are studying human experience and human transcendency. You're learning how to come from infancy into the divine. And myth is going to speak to you in a way that I can't and no one else can. So it's extremely, extremely important. I want to stop here and see if there are any questions coming from Brother Patrick or Brother Benjamin.
I have a question.
Tell
Can
me.
you tell us about the degree system in Freemasonry? Why the story split up the way it is, how many degrees there are, and how it differs from other Masonic obediences?
Okay, so in order to answer that question, thank you, Brother Benjamin. I have to preface it. There's a little bit of information on the back side of things. So you have different degrees that are, it's kind of like a ladder, is what we call it, Masonic ladder, that builds on top of each other. So, keeps going up and up. You have the first degree. So every Mason is going to be a first degree if they're following the Masonic path. So when you're initiated, that means you're a first degree member. And then you go to the second and then the third. After that, it is very different depending on the different obediences that are out there. So a lot of times people, they'll start with the first, go through second and third. And then if they want to do other degrees or other types of masonry, they have to go to other organizations. And in Universal Co-Masonry, we don't do that. And neither does the Ladrahime, I tell you that as well. We have first, second, and third degree, and then you go to the fourth, and then you have the Lodge of Perfection that's in there. And so you start to build up until you get to the 33rd degree. So that whole ladder is called the Ancient and Accepted Universal Rite. That is the ladder that Universal Co-Masonry practices. Again, that's the Ancient and Accepted Universal Rite. You have the Scottish Rite, you have all sorts of different rites that are out there, but that's what Universal Co-Masonry uses to help with that Masonic grand narrative. So, for example, Brother Patrick and Brother Benjamin and I, we're at different degrees, but because we ascended the same ladder, we all are at the same understanding when we get to the lowest of the 3 degrees in here. So we can say, oh yeah, okay, well, let's talk about that story and what's going on in there and compare it to the degrees that are below. And then for those of us that are higher in those degrees, then we can interpolate it or extrapolate it further into those higher degrees. So the rite is a conglomerate of different dramas and rituals. The first, second, and third degree is called lots of names: craft masonry, symbolic masonry. It even has a color, blue masonry. So you'll hear Masons talk about all the different names they're referring to the first 3 degrees. That is the one thing, if you join any Masonic obedience, that you will have in common with someone else, is that you were all initiated, and then if you ascend up, you were all passed and all raised. Why are they cut up the way they are? Well, that's a good question. I don't have a great answer because that would, there's so many rituals. It was first it was 3, and then it was 3 plus 1, and then there was 25, and then there was 33 and or 32 and then 33. Like there's a movement, and Memphis Mizraim has 96 degrees. So like it just depends what obedience you're looking at. But think of this as going through education in your country. So you start out on a primary level, and you have grades within that primary level that build. And then you have the higher, the secondary and then post-secondary. And that's what Masonry has. It has the primary degrees that lay the foundation. And then depending on your merit and ability, you can advance upward into the secondary and the post-secondary. And each grade is going to have a story that's specific to that grade that is trying to impart an understanding to you. And it's not just going to come out and say, this is what you're supposed to be getting out of it. It's done in a story so you can figure out what is it all about. What is it that Masonry is trying to tell you? Masonry is for the curious. It's for the people who want humility and have humility, but they have to be curious. They really need to want more. More is in the sense of a philosophical or spiritual or intellectual satisfaction. You can't just come in and be like, unzip my head and stuff in it, and I'll just do whatever you tell me. That will never work for you. It's people who have kind of their own conscience that are like, I'm this religion and I love it, but I just need a little bit more. And I find that Masonry makes that, doable for me. So why is it divided the way it is? It's what makes sense the most when they can join the Lodge of Perfection, and then you have the, capitulary degrees and so forth, and the philosophic degrees and the administrative degrees on the higher end. And it's because they make sense together in their story. So, like the Lodge of Perfection is from the 4th to the 14th degree. And those degrees have an arc to it and that have a story, and they're slices of that story. But the 14th degree is the culmination of the story. For the capitulary degrees, you'll see that the 18th, so the 15th to the 18th the 18th is kind of like that capstone degree. And there's no obedience in the world that does every single degree. It's just not possible. There's too much manpower needed, and there's certain clothes you have to wear, and there's certain stories you have to put on, and so it becomes very cost ineffective. So what you see in most Masonic jurisdictions is they'll do that capstone degree. They'll do the 14th, and they'll communicate all the other degrees underneath it, so that when you walk out of that meeting, you have from the 4th to the 14th. So that's the Masonic ladder. And just like in your education, your outside education at school, you don't advance until you're ready to. So you're not just like told to go. At least you shouldn't be. And so there's examinations and there's test of your proficiency, and to make sure that you really understand a proficiency, not a mastery, which is very different. Mastery is, A plus proficiency. You have a general understanding of some certain things in masonry. And then if you do have that, then you're ready to go to the next degree and get that next part of the story. So imagine that there's this grand myth in masonry that is 33 degrees long, and each degree is a slice of that story. And it doesn't mean that the names are going to cross over, or that, you're like, oh, and I left off on page 5 and now I'm on page 6. It's not that cohesive. It's very, it's just not cohesive. I don't even know how to say it, because it's not jarring in any way. It's just, you have to be up on your understanding to make sure you follow through. So that's the degree system. And the reason why they're separated is because that's the way they're making sense. And if there's a greater reason, maybe I'll find that out later in life, but I haven't learned anything outside of that. All right, let's get to something that's a little bit different. Let's talk about recognition, because lots of people always want to know, why isn't masonry just one big happy family that gets along? And that's a great question. Why don't any families get along? There's a big, excuse my language, pissing match between a lot of Masonic obediences and their relationship with each other. Universal Co-Masonry doesn't play that game. It's not that we don't look at people and say, well, you weren't justly initiated, passed, and raised in a working Masonic obedience. It's not that we don't do that. We definitely cross our T's and dot our I's and make sure people have their documentation in place. But we don't care if people recognize us or think us condescending. That has no groundwork whatsoever on whether or not I'm a real Mason to those people. It's irrelevant to their opinion. Oftentimes there is a convolution of like women can't be Masons. Like, that's impossible. That's an invention. That wasn't always the case. And there are records of women in the building guilds. No, they weren't a lot, but they were there. And so there, as you move, at least in the United States, the further you move west on the map, the more and more they became like obsessed with women not being in Masonry. But I don't care if they look at me or not. So when we look at the recognition, it comes down to whether or not they have this beautiful charter that comes from some established Grand Lodge that tells them that they can operate. And it's not that that's not an important document, but it's not the end all be all, because what happened is there was 4 lodges in England back in the day in the 1700s that that decided that they were going to form a Grand Lodge, which became the United Grand Lodge of England, which broke apart and then came back together, which is why it's called the United Grand Lodge of England now. And they're the ones that were like, we should make Grand Lodge, and then we're going to issue all the patents and charters and warrants for people to, become Masons. I mean, where did their patent and charter come from? No one. So, like, are they not real? Are they clandestine? Are they unrecognizable? I think that's crazy. There are certain landmarks that you have to have in place in order to be a Mason, 7 Master Masons and whatnot. At your initiation, you have to do certain things that are considered regular. But to sit there and have a pissing match over your pedigree is very, I think, archaic, draconian in every sense of the word. So why don't we all get along? Because Masonry is made up of people. People don't get along, and unfortunately, their differences get brought into systems where they don't belong, but they're there. So In Universal Co-Masonry, I've had men who tell me, I'm not a Mason and whatnot. It's irritating, I know what I am, but it doesn't mean that I'm not because some man in some random state told me I can't be a Mason because I'm a woman. So the reason why they don't get along is, oftentimes they'll blame the, men that are Black or African descent that they weren't free, that they were slaves. So they couldn't be, and women were property of men, and that, that they couldn't be. And there's one, is it Ward that said that women can't keep secrets? I think it's Ward, or maybe it's Buck. I'm not sure. I think that's the same person. I can't think of the name. But there is a Masonic author, long since passed, that was like, women can't keep secrets. That's why they can't be Masons. And so there's a lot of fabricated reasons, and none of them good. It is the grand hope of Universal Co-Masonry that we can unite under one banner of Masonry. And I'm not saying that, we're here to stamp out other organizations because they need to exist for their own reasons. But to share in bonds of amity with other people is an amazing experience. We have what's called a treaty of amity. And it just means that we recognize like we are in the same goals and aims as another obedience. And so our members can visit, across the two jurisdictions. And we have several of those. And there's some that are not interested, that we don't have the same aim. So it doesn't make sense, especially those that are very atheistic. They have no desire for our members to come over to us. And why would our members want to go over there? They're not in the same aim. And so the Masonry doesn't sit the same way. So there is a network, I think, of not only organizations that try to work together to be more fraternal and kind and accepting. And there's also a lot of individuals. I have met some very wonderful male craft Masons who have been very kind to me over the years. They didn't have to be. And there was people that were their colleagues in Masonry, and they were definitely not nice to me. And, so there are people out there who don't necessarily agree with it, even though their organization still falls in line with, well, we don't recognize Prince Hall. We were just talking earlier that there's 3 Grand Lodges left in the United States that still hasn't recognized Prince Hall, which, if you're not familiar with Prince Hall, that's typically tends to be a Black or African American descent, men only Masonry, named after a gentleman, Prince Hall. And there's still 3 states in the United States that doesn't. That's crazy to me. We're in 2026, and that's wild. But we are working towards it, just as like anyone else, that we want to get along. A lot of us do, and hopefully someday that vision can be embraced. Will there ever be a time that Masonic bodies recognize each other? That's the other part of the question. It depends. It depends on society. If society takes steps back and starts to peel people apart into different groups and all that, then Masonry will represent that. If we keep going on the forward step of everyone's equal and everyone belongs in Masonry, that wants to be there, then I think you'll see that we will get there, at least in countries that share that idea. I have heard many people who have come from different obediences who want to either be reinitiated with us or affiliated. And they have said, I can't accept the fact that I can't sit in lodge with a Black gentleman or a lady or whatever. Like, that's crazy. That goes against the contemporary mind. And so we're working on that. That's the short of it. And the other part of that question is, isn't that closer to the perfection of humanity? Yes. The more we can get along, the better we will all be. And the image that comes to my mind is a body of water. The greatest destruction to any body of water is the cutoff of water flow. It becomes stagnant. It starts to, the sediment, it starts to build up and it starts to choke out the water and eventually just becomes, dry, flat land. But if you look at a body of water that has diversity in it, that has water constantly running into it, that has a very diverse ecosystem where there's a lot of mutations and different organisms interacting, you're going to find a very healthy ecosystem, very healthy body of water. And I'd like to think, if you look at a water molecule, you have an oxygen in the middle and you have 2 hydrogens that come off at it's a 104.5 degree angle, if I remember correctly. And that hydrogen to oxygen bond is extremely important. It creates a very unique type of bonding. And I'd like to think that Freemasonry has that unique type of bonding that allows us to, even though we're coming from different bodies of water, to come together into collective fraternal pond that helps to nourish the ecosystem around us. And the ecosystem around us are our various communities that aren't a part of Masonry, that are a part of us, but don't necessarily have their hand in Masonry. And that we're constantly replenishing that diversity and that uniqueness around us. That's my vision of what a perfect spiritual humanity would be like, that spiritual ecosystem where everyone is just interacting and building each other up and allowing for their differences. There's a lot of brothers that don't agree with me, and there's a lot of brothers I don't agree with. But at the same time, like I can find what we agree on and I can live in that space and allow for our differences to move off of us, kind of like bubbles against bubbles. Um, when we look at masonry, by studying all points of the circumference, it allows us to understand all aspects of the different parts of humanity we come into contact with. It doesn't matter if it's religious or political, or if it's just you're in a totally different culture. Sitting down and being in that space and allowing you to view that experience with whoever you're with allows you to interact with the people that are coming down the road that share that same language. And that allows you to help build, as I like to say when I would moderate MPS, build bridges, not moats. That's what Masonry is trying to do. And if we can build more bridges, then we'll see a very, very happy, healthy humanity. All right. Some other stuff that has come up as questions, and you guys can just flag me down when a question comes up. How about that? We have to get to conspiracy theories because that's always some people's favorite. Social media question, and then a ritual question. All right. So the media question that we have are non-Masons allowed to repost feeds from UCM, Universal Co-Masonry, for any other purpose? And that's fine. You can, if there's any material, if you find a podcast you like, post it. If there's something we posted and you want to repost it, post it. It's out there for the public to use and to hopefully be enriched by. So absolutely, you can do that. Not a problem. The conspiracy. So one of the questions, let's see, I lost my spot. All right. Why do people accuse Freemasonry of instigating wars between countries and controlling governments? And why hasn't Freemasonry issued a statement to justify this? People will accuse anybody of anything. Freemasonry, again, is that it's a very generic, it's like saying humanity, but humanity is made up of so many different type of people. It's really hard to put your finger on one. Why do people accuse Freemasons of instigating wars between countries and controlling governments? You will find because Masons are willing to talk with other people, they're very curious people, they want to engage with people, but we have rituals that are sacred, and so we don't share them with people, we don't publicize that. And so anytime you have something that is not genuinely open to the public, it often gets vilified and conspiracy theories go all around it. It's been a long time since I've done our conspiracy theory lecture. Maybe I should do that one again. I think it's been like 3 years before. But yeah, I mean, there's people think we're in with cabals and stuff like that. No, we're not. And why does Freemasonry not issue a statement? Well, first off, there's no one voice for Freemasonry. And second of all, I mean, it's just ludicrous to think that there might be someone who's a Mason somewhere who's not doing good things in their government. There's that, but that's not Masonry doing it. That's like saying, there's bad Christians and Jews and Muslims and everything in between. Like there are bad people doing bad things and they may be one thing or the other. But Masonry on the whole is not going to support unconstitutional protests and unconstitutional depending on what country you're in. It's not just the US Constitution. If there's something that's wrong, Masonry wants its people to stand up, but they want it to do it in the most civil and respectful possible way. That doesn't always work out. I mean, we had the Revolutionary War and we had Masons on both sides of that. So that's the conspiracy one. And there's lots of conspiracies out there. Then they're just not true. But I think ultimately it comes down to the fact that you have a type of masonry, and this is not Universal Co-Masonry, which is going to segue me into another question. There's this idea that masonry is networking. And there's a type of masonry that's out there where it is about, passing cards and, you call me and I know her and that person's going to get me whatever deal. And That is not Universal Co-Masonry. And I'm just going to say flat out, that's not Masonry. Masonry is not a business meeting. It's not, pass your card out. So we get people who, they want to be a really famous musician, or they have literature that they want to publish, or they have projects that they want to be funded. I think those are all great aims. That's not Masonry. Like, I don't come to Masonry and I'm like, hey, Brother Patrick, do you want blah, blah, blah? Hey, Brother Benjamin, can you hook me up? Like, that's actually, I have seen that, and that has been quashed in our order. We don't do that. Like, you don't mix your business with Masonry. And people are here to spiritually advance themselves, not to get, the phone number of the next highest person on the ring of importance. So for people who come to us in Masonry and say, oh, I want you to support my projects, that's not us. Go find another benefactor that would do that, because we're not interested. What we're interested in is helping provide resources to those who want to be spiritually and intellectually and psychologically satisfied. That's what and we're looking for people who are seekers, who want to, come on the inside of it and learn through ritual and whatnot to better themselves, not just for the sake of betterment of their own personal welfare, but also of, more importantly, the rest of the world. So I would be very cautious about all the conspiracy theories out there. The thing about conspiracy theories is there's always some element of like truth in it. Like, oh, like that bad person was a Freemason. Yeah, that doesn't mean that Freemasonry is like, go do this terrible thing. Again, remember, Masonry tells you to live a virtuous life. So going in and being underhanded and deceitful is very anti-Masonic. What they do is they take a bit of truth and they say, oh, and then they doctor it up and they make it this grand narrative. So be careful in what you read, especially with anything that's conspiracy theory. That's where I'd go about it. All right, Brother Patrick.
So someone asks if Co-Masonry allows plural membership between Co-Masonry and other Masonic obediences.
Depends. It's like my answer for everything. It's a very short seminar. It depends. If it's another Masonic obedience, typically no. Again, it's really hard to be a member of two Masonic obediences. When you have something like someone who's a Martinist and that wants to be a Mason, that works because they're in the esoteric community, in the occult community, they share a community, but they're not sharing the same foundation, right? Where it's like if someone was a Mason and they wanted to affiliate with us and keep dual membership, it's like being a Baptist and a Catholic. That's really hard to do. Not that there aren't some out there who are gifted and can do it and somehow make it work. That's really hard to do because you tend to like gravitate towards one or the other. There are certain Masonic obediences that, excuse me, not certain Masonic obediences, but there are certain esoteric communities that no problem. Typically what happens if we have someone that's coming from another obedience and they have not already demitted, which demitted means to resign, we ask that they submit a demit letter and that they give us a copy of it just so that we know that the membership has ceased. We don't like poaching members. We're not duplicitous, so we want to make sure that we don't want to be copied on the email. Like this is between you and the other obedience. So once that's cleaned up and put away nicely, then by all means affiliate with us. So if it's a Masonic obedience, 9 out of 10 times, unless it's some really special matter, you have to demit. And then if it's just an esoteric Rosicrucian, Martinist, then you can, you have to release that information to us and say, yeah, I'm a Martinist or I'm a Rosicrucian. We just want to know, not that we're going to go seek out your membership elsewhere. And again, like the Golden Dawn, Flema tends to be hard. Like there's a lot of investigation that goes behind that, and I've never really seen that be successful. Someone having dual membership in those. So we're pretty thorough. We really want you to invest your time with whatever organization you're with. And if you can do both, then by all means, you're more than welcome to. Let's see. Does Co-Masonry accept Master Masons from the male-only Blue Lodge? Yes. Yes, we do. Not to put Brother Benjamin on the spot or divulge his story, but Brother Benjamin comes from another obedience. And yeah, he's a pretty good guy. Don't tell him I said that. Like, it's not a problem. It's just as long as you have your paperwork, you can choose to be reinitiated. And in some cases, we'll have a brother, instead of just doing the affiliation ceremony, we'll have them undergo the ceremony of raising, just so they have a ceremony with Universal Co-Masonry that is a part of their affiliating process. I will tell you, Universal Co-Masonry does ritual really well. We do it very well. We're very careful with it. And so we want our members to, experience it at the first chance that they can. So yes, you can come from another Masonic obedience. If you have already demitted, you just reinstate your membership through us. Or if you are wanting, you can just affiliate, which is the same thing. And let's see. All right, to get to this question here. So this individual is really interested in co-masonry as an idea and the topics that we discussed, but doesn't really want to do ritual and is not close to a lodge. And the question is it possible to only participate in the philosophical aspects, and are there online discussions? So if you are someone who's like, man, I really like what we do at seminar, or I really like doing MPS, you don't have to join it. Like, your attendance does not mean we expect to see your application. So this is indefinite. Like, you can attend for as long as you want. And there's people I've met on MPS back in the day, which I think was 2012 was when we started, or 2008, one of the two. So when we started MPS, I should know that date. But we still have people who do MPS and they'll never join. And I knew one woman who joined from MPS. She decided to become a Mason, decided that she just liked MPS, and she just went back to MPS and resigned being a Mason. And she's unique, but yeah, you can go to the online meetings. We have a North American online that's on the third Monday, so it's next Monday, and it's at the same time as this, so 6 p.m. And that's online. You can go to www.philosophicalsociety.org. You can find in-person centers or online centers. We do not tape those, so if you miss it, you just miss it. You have to attend either in person at a center or online. Masonic Seminar, same thing. You can keep coming indefinitely. Like I said, I try to keep the lectures each month different or fresh, so that's not hearing the same thing. All right, the next question. This is a bit of a history one. I'm interested in the name Freemason and what is its origin. Why are we called Freemason? There is no known answer, though there is the one that most people think is correct, comes from 1355. 1355, there was a company of Masons that came together, and they had like an inner circle, and it was an operating guild, and that inner circle wasn't. So in order to come into that center, like that special circle, you had to go undergo the ceremony of acceptance. That's where the ancient free and accepted Mason comes from, and the name accepted, they believe. And so by saying you're an accepted Mason, that meant you underwent the ceremony of acceptance, which was a very exclusive group that was in the middle of this company that formed operating guilds. Again, the inner circle was not necessarily Masons, like operating Masons. And then the free part was that it implied that you didn't belong to any guild specifically. It wasn't like it belonged to the Universal Co-Masonry Guild or the Grand Lodge of such and such guild. It was, not that they called them that, but it was that they were kind of an independent individual. And so when you say you're a free Mason, it was a Mason who did not belong to a specific guild. So ancient free, not of a guild, and accepted went through the ceremony of acceptance Masons. That's one speculation of where that word came from that most people kind of accept as true because we just don't know. The other one is that I've heard it comes from Egypt, and it's a form of the word sons of light, which I have to say is my personal favorite because I think that's beautiful. Whether it's true or not, I don't know, but it hails from more of an Egyptian time and etymology, meaning sons of light. So it is in the realm of speculation. You can definitely go research it, but those are the two prominent ideas. All right. Any questions from you guys?
I have a question that I've gotten from multiple people. So, I get this question of what do Freemasons do? Like, what is our aim? How is that practiced in life outside of just doing ritual work? What do Masons do, and what is our aim?
So what do Freemasons do outside of lodge?
Or in? It's a difficult question that I've struggled to answer myself. So I just want to hear your take on it.
Well, what we do in the lodge is what we should be doing outside of the lodge, and vice versa. So again, through myth and legend, we are taught various
spiritual and philosophical truths that hopefully hit you in your core to a point of transformation. And then you take that, we do that, like we do it through ritual and fraternity, and you take that into the outside world. And you try to implement it in whatever way that you can in the various communities that you are. For example, as I've said before, I used to be a teacher in the secondary schools, and
Sorry to interrupt. Bit of a technical difficulty. Could you please let me into the Gmail account on your phone?
yes, absolute power. Gmail?
Yes.
All right. 1 second, please. Yeah. Yep, there you go.
Thank you very much.
You're welcome. So, what was this? It was a great sentence. So through ritual, you're taught all this stuff, and I was telling you how I was a teacher. That's where I was at. So, I learned a lot. I was just telling some brothers that I was visiting with Brother Patrick in the Philippines over, we got back last week. So like a couple weeks ago, we were there and we were talking, and I was telling them, like, in my own personal space, it's very hard to believe, but I'm a quiet person. I don't really like to talk, weirdly enough. And anyone who knows me, who knows me in Masonry is like, that's crazy because I talked for an hour and a half. I used to be a teacher, like whatever. But I'm a really quiet person. And so Masonry taught me how to articulate my words and my thoughts much better than if I was left to my own purposes. So when I used to teach, instead of, I can't use my classroom as a platform. That's not ethical, in my opinion. But what I would do is whenever you have kids, the kids were always in a riot over, some dumb policy that they didn't like no hat policy or, your cell phones or whatever. And I remember I had a class that was really upset over some social issue that was going on in the school. And this girl came in and she was just like, Mrs. Kumsier, like, can you believe it? She was really, really mad. And Masonry taught me, instead of going into the drama and being like, yeah, that's awful, to really sit back and be like, well, have you thought it through from this perspective? And, and I did. I started to use the things that I had learned in Masonry. I started to use in this particular instance, like, well, what about this? And did you think about that? And at the end of the 20 minutes that I took class time from it, and for the 20 minutes, like the kids came down from like a full riot mode to like completely calm. And that wasn't because of me. That was Masonry. I had learned many tools that had helped me say, it's really easy to get into the vibe. And if I remember correctly, I think I even agreed with the students. I thought that the administration was doing something that they shouldn't be. And it wasn't, my job wasn't to undermine the administration, but it was also not to invalidate what they saw to be unfair. And Masonry allowed for me to take what I had learned in Lodge over numerous years and impact that community. And that student, when she graduated a couple years later, had written in her, thank you card, that particular instance. And she said, I now use that as a gauge for when I'm in other situations to help me get myself out of it and see it more objectively. So in that one moment, even though she didn't know I was using Masonic principles, she had learned the same thing. And that's what a Mason should be doing. It's not just example, but it's active interaction. Yeah, I want to sit back and be quiet and let other people talk, but that's not what people need. People need to be asked questions, and they need to be mined to understand who they are as an individual, because people want to talk about themselves, not in the narcissistic, self-centered way. But they're people and they're going through struggles and they're concerned about things. And just to sit there and be quiet because that's what I prefer to do isn't the right thing to do. And so Masonry teaches you the tools to be in your own way exceptional. Brother Ben's exceptional in one way and Brother Patrick at another, and Brother, so-and-so and so. Like, we're all exceptional in our own way because Masonry helped bring that out and said, you have this, go use it. Go help other people, alleviate the suffering, help them find reason, and also faith, whatever ratio that needs to be for that person. Like, you need to be a conduit to the light. And so Masonry takes what you do in ritual and allows you to practice it in fact. And I use Masonry all the time in work. Teaching is it's a profession with a lot of people who can complain. And so, sitting back and just not being the person that allows the gossip and the complaining and, trying to look on the good things of people, or, trying to understand a situation really helps that environment. And every one of us can do that, whether we're in a corporate, public sector, or if we're working for the government, or if we're a stay-at-home parent, or we're a grandparent. We all have different things that we can do that Masonry brings out in us. that's probably the number one thing that Masonry has taught me. And I'm kind of ashamed that I had to be taught. I don't know why I just didn't know it's that everyone is divine and you just have to help them find it and you have to help yourself find it sometimes with some people. Everyone is here for a reason and you should not be there to cause them to forget that. That doesn't mean you can't have tough love and that doesn't mean that you don't say things that you need to say that are hard for them to hear and for them to say it back to you. But your job is to alleviate the sum of human misery and not add to it. That's why during COVID was when it really started to see that polarity show up, at least in the United States. And I was talking to another brother, and she was like, "Yeah, I defriended so and so, another brother, and because he voted a certain way." And I was like, "That's crazy! Like, you don't defriend people. Listen to the term defriend." And we got in this huge discussion. We were driving from North Carolina to South Carolina. We were going to an MPS, actually, is where we were going, and we were driving down. And we were just having this huge discussion about what it meant to defriend someone and what was the Masonic standpoint. Like, well, I am very firm about how I feel about this situation. And, Masonry teaches us to stand on our principles. Yes. And Masonry also helps us to stand on virtue. And, defriending someone instead of having a conversation is probably not the way to support your ethics. And and I don't think she ever refriended that brother, but we had this really good discussion about it. And I don't defriend people. I just don't believe in it. If I don't like what they're posting, then I just scroll past it or I comment on it if I think that it would be useful. But ultimately, it comes down to the fact that you opened up a can with this question, that Masonry needs to be a living thing. If you're going to do Masonry as a hobby, that will be only what it's going to be. It will never be anything else. Some people are like, well, I can't give my life like other brothers do. Well, no one's asking you to quit your job and go travel the world and do what, no one's asking you to do that. What Masonry is telling you to do is live it, make it living. As I often quip, like, we're not theoretical Masons. We don't just study the theory of Masonry. We're applied Masons. We apply what we learn. So when I come up against something in Masonry that really I'm like, man, I'm struggling with this, I don't assume that I'm right and it's wrong. I assume, and maybe this is just the science background to me, it's like, falsifiability. Like, I'm probably wrong. So I need, like, a brother was just asking me this morning if I believed in something. And I was like, I don't like it, but I don't think I know enough about it to actually have an opinion. I've never studied it. The issue isn't on the theory, it's on me understanding the theory and having that humility to say, I don't know enough about it. I really need to embrace it and go study it. And so when we look at Masonry, Masonry has to be lived, and we have to be willing to ask questions all the time. And we have, like, the brothers here in the general office are constantly keeping me at task, make sure that I'm not falling short. And that's what brotherhood's about. Like, it's not about nitpicking each other, but it's about supporting each other and saying, hey, you said this and now you're saying this, like, which one is it? Is it, and why did you change? And why do you, having a dialogue, again, getting to know the individual. That's what Masonry is about. It's about that fraternity. And that's why Masonry is selective. It's an application process. Because you wouldn't trust anyone with your social security number or your bank account, right? You shouldn't. So when you look at it, you screen people to make sure that they're worthy of that trust. And we have something that's greater than those things. We have people's spiritual innocency and vulnerability that's coming out. And they're not just going to give it to anyone, nor should they. And the brotherhood is there to help with the process. One time I met this couple in Nevada that wanted to join, and they had been a Mason, but they were doing it like in their living room because it was kind of like a correspondence. I never really knew the name of the organization, but they were like, you just can't do Masonry by yourself. And you can't. That's why you need a community. That's why lodges are so important. Yes, we have online meetings where we study different aspects, but it never is the same as actually being in lodge and having those conversations and doing the ritual and just making it a very live and active thing. So I hope that answers your question in a very long, long way. We're coming to the conclusion here. I don't want to just talk for the sake of talking. I don't know if there's any other questions that are coming in. But the number one thing I would say about Masonry is you'll never know enough to be completely comfortable joining, because Masonry just doesn't give you enough. You'll never be able to read everything because most of the literature on Masonry that's current is usually historical And the ritual stuff doesn't make sense because there's no context to it. So you should wait to read that until you're actually in that degree. But you'll never know enough. And so it's the Masonic Seminar specifically works to just build in those cracks that we can. But eventually the jump is a leap of faith in that you're like, okay, I've done as much as I can. I feel like this is a good thing. And then, I'm going to apply. But it can't be done for any other motive than the highest motive. No one can, like, I can't talk you into it, nor would I talk you into it. You can't, be pushed into it in any way. It has to be something that comes directly from you if it is to mean anything. And it is hard work. Like helping release the sum of the human misery is no small task. We studied last month Dante's Inferno. We talked about the nine circles of hell. That's a lot of human suffering, especially since a lot of those circles had like subcircles, and there's every type of possible moral and rational decay that you could have. And the world is conflicted with that. But the world is also bathed in light. And so if we can help people find their purpose in life, there's no greater joy and there's no greater service that a Mason can do than help someone find their purpose. Not tell them what the purpose is, but help them find it. And that way they can live to their fullest. And not everyone's going to step up. There'll be people who trip and fall, but the point of a Mason is to always be there. I often think of the Knights Templar and, how they used to guard the way to, guard the holy road to Mount, was it Temple Mount? I'm getting tired. What's the
It was to the Temple Mount.
Yeah, Temple Mount. Okay. I want to make sure I'm saying the wrong thing. They would guard it and they would, it didn't matter what people believed in, they guarded it. And that's what Masons are. Like we guard the passages for others, but we have to understand how to use our tools. Our sword is going to be virtue and our shield is going to be understanding. And that allows us to really work with those around us and ourselves to become more than what we thought we could be. And especially now when the world feels so divisive and people feel so isolated and angry, like we have no better moment to exist than right now to help people find their way, to help ourselves, to help our families, to reconnect to the transcendent, which has been lost. And through that, we will find that humanity will reach its ultimate destination, whatever that may be. And that whether it takes one lifetime or many, that we were a part of the solution rather than the creator of the problem. And that's ultimately what I want to leave you with about our discussion tonight, with the questions and answers. And again, I appreciate those who submitted them and asked them along the way, because the questions are really important. There's no question that is off topic in Masonry. We might tell you you need to wait because it's the wrong degree or whatnot, but questions are important. And it's not just so you can unlock your mind and have some pour things into there. It's so that you can truly find the answers that matter. So if you have any questions that come up between now and next month, by all means, email me. If you are looking to, get an application, email me. I can get you connected to the general office. If you are needing books to study or you want to talk about a podcast, talk about it. That's the important thing, is to talk about it. A lot of people believe in a lot of things they can't articulate, and it's really hard for them because no one's going to listen. So we're here if you want to talk about it, and if you have a community that you can share it with them so that everyone can be heard. So I want to thank everyone for coming out this evening here in the United States, specifically Colorado. I want to thank Brother Patrick and Brother Benjamin for their time, as always, here in the general office. And next month, maybe I could do the history of Universal Co-Masonry. I could also do the conspiracies. There's lots to choose from. So stay tuned for the next episode of the Masonic Seminar series. And we're looking at getting a facelift on our logo and all that. So if you see a little bit different, by all means, that's just us trying to improve. And I appreciate those who have emailed me with their feedback. As always, we're very happy to listen and make the changes where we can. Have a wonderful evening or a brand new day if you're starting one out. We look forward to seeing you very soon. Take care.